The asphalt wars, the long stretch of Route 66, had always been the domain of the Iron Vultures, a notorious biker gang that ruled the asphalt like modern-day outlaws. Their roaring Harleys, adorned with skull decals and flags flapping in the wind, were a familiar sight to anyone traveling through the desolate heart of the American Midwest. For years, they had controlled the roads with intimidation and raw power, demanding tolls from truckers, terrorizing small towns, and treating the highway as their personal playground. But everything changed when the soldiers showed up. The arrival, it started with a convoy of military vehicles. Humvees, troop carriers, and jeeps rolling into the small town of Redstone, a dusty outpost that sat like a forgotten pebble on the edge of the desert. The soldiers were part of the 212th Engineering Battalion, a National Guard unit deployed to repair a crumbling stretch of Route 66 that had been neglected for decades. They came with tools, determination, and a strict sense of order. The Iron Vultures didn't like it. Not one bit. The bikers had grown used to doing whatever they wanted on the open road, and this sudden influx of soldiers, clean-cut, disciplined, and unyielding, felt like an invasion. The gang's leader, a burly man named Razor, made his feelings clear the first time the two groups crossed paths. "You're on our road now," Razor growled, standing toe-to-toe with Lieutenant Marshall, the young officer in charge of the battalion. Razor's leather vest was covered in patches that told stories of barroom brawls and outlaw pride, while Marshall's crisp uniform spoke of duty and discipline. "This road belongs to the people," Marshall replied, refusing to back down. "We're here to fix it for everyone." The tension was palpable. And it was just the beginning clash of cultures. The soldiers worked tirelessly under the blazing sun, repairing potholes and reinforcing bridges, while the Iron Vultures shadowed them like vultures circling a dying animal. The bikers revved their engines at all hours, kicked up dust, and even sabotaged equipment. They wanted to scare the soldiers off, to remind them who truly ruled the road, but the soldiers didn't scare easily. Many of them were veterans who had seen combat overseas. They were used to adversity, and they weren't about to let a gang of bikers intimidate them. Slowly but surely, they pushed forward with their mission, even as the bikers' tactics grew more aggressive. One night, things escalated. A group of bikers set fire to a supply tent, destroying tools and materials the soldiers desperately needed. The next morning, Lieutenant Marshall confronted Razor at the town's only diner. "You think this is over?" Marshall said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not. You've had your run of this place for too long. That ends now." Razor smirked, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The soldiers weren't backing down, and that was something the Iron Vultures weren't used to. The turning point. The real turning point came during a brutal sandstorm. The storm swept across the desert without warning, forcing everyone, soldiers and bikers alike, to seek shelter. A group of bikers, caught off guard in the open, found themselves stranded on the highway as the storm raged around them. Their bikes were useless in the face of the howling wind and blinding sand. It was the soldiers who came to their rescue, ignoring the animosity between the two groups. Lieutenant Marshall and his team drove into the storm in their Humvees, pulling the stranded bikers to safety. When the storm finally passed, Razor and his gang found themselves sitting around a fire with the very people they had been trying to drive away. "You didn't have to do that," Razor admitted. "Staring into the flames, that's not how we work," Marshall replied. "We look out for people." All people. The bikers were silent, their tough exteriors cracked by the simple act of kindness. For the first time, they began to see the soldiers not as enemies, but as fellow travelers on the same road, the new road. In the weeks that followed, the hostility between the two groups began to fade. The bikers, impressed by the soldiers' resilience and camaraderie, even started helping with the road repairs. They brought tools, offered protection from anyone foolish enough to try and mess with the soldiers, and used their knowledge of the area to make the work go faster. By the time the 212th the Engineering Battalion packed up and moved on to their next assignment, the bikers and the soldiers had formed an unlikely bond. The Iron Vultures still ruled the road, but they did so with a newfound sense of purpose. They stopped extorting truckers and began protecting travelers instead, ensuring that Route 66 remained safe for everyone. In the end, the road didn't belong to the soldiers or the bikers. It belonged to everyone who traveled it. And that was how it should be. Epilogue. Years later, a new sign appeared at the entrance to Redstone. It read, "Welcome to Redstone, home of the Asphalt Alliance." Beneath it was the symbol of two crossed wrenches, surrounded by a pair of wings. It was a tribute to the soldiers and the bikers who had once been enemies, but who had come together to reclaim the road, not just for themselves, but for all who passed through.